Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at the YMZFPV Lightning2. You might have seen this on the channel already, but if you recall, that was the Walksnail version. This is good old analog, and when it comes to micros, you really can't beat the performance of a lower weight analog. But as for one of my primary concerns is you see we're missing a motor and an arm on the Walksnail version. Just as a refresher, I was going 100% full throttle. I was going to do a chimney dive, and on my way up, I caught the chimney, and I broke the camera as well as lost an arm and the motor and the prop and everything. And that was probably 7-8 months ago, and I never found the motor or the prop. So we're going to skip going through all the typical techs and specs and stuff like that. We're going to jump right to the weights and the batteries that I used or will fit into this particular holder. The Lightning2 analog weighs 42.13 grams. These are the batteries that I have available. They do fit inside the holder or the 3D printed tray. Of course, you can always use straps or something like that to use different batteries. I did not fly the 380s, and we'll get into that when we get into the flight footage. With the Nanotech 300, it weighs just a touch under 60 grams. With the 380, it weighs 64.03 grams. With the Beta FPV Lava 450, it weighs 68.16 grams. With the old G&B 450, it weighs 68.97 grams. And with the red label G&B 550, it weighs 70.84 grams. The carbon fiber looks to be just a touch under 2 millimeters thick, just like the previous version that came with Walksnail. And motor post to motor post and get about 92 millimeters. This is our main flight, and this is on the red labeled 550 G&B 2S battery. I did not, as I say, flew the 380, and the reason why I skipped that was, one, I thought that was one of the harder ones to get in the battery tray, and I felt on the 400 and the 450 that it felt kind of floaty. And I did try my super old, or well-used, I should say, my Nanotech 300s, which you may have heard me talk about before. They don't even come with an XT30. They come with the PH2 or JST-PH red connector that we used to use many, many years ago, so you have to transition those. This just isn't quite efficient enough to run those super small Nanotech batteries. I think it'd probably be fine on the 380s, but again, I even felt on the 450s that I was trying that it felt floaty and floaty. I really stressed the T there. But I really wanted the extra weight so I could do a lot more punch outs, because I didn't feel that the 550 made it fly funny or heavy. So it actually, for me, it made it feel a little bit more natural as far as a 2-inch micro goes. And with analog, you know, as far as flight performance goes, you just can't beat the good old low weight of analog and performance. You know, I've got a 450 battery, and I'm going to do a number of different punch outs and some fairly high throttle, not just punch outs, but other maneuvers as well. And we're going to get over 4 minutes of flight, and this is a well-used 550. All my 2S batteries have been well used. So if you have fresh 2S batteries, you're very likely to get better performance as well as longer flight times. As far as the cruisy flights that I did battery testing, so if you like to explore or do more of a traditional flat sort of flying with pretty mild maneuvers or speed, I can tell you that on the 450 I got 6 minutes and 15 seconds on average, and on the 550 got 8 minutes and 30 seconds on average. The 380s I did not fly, but based upon the 300s that I did fly and the 450s that I did fly, I would say you would probably get cruisy, flat sort of, you know, conservative sort of flight. It's somewhere around maybe 4.5 minutes on the 380. The blue label G&B, unfortunately, it just didn't perform very well, so I'm not reporting the flight time on it. I don't know if that is, it looks like it's a fairly fresh battery, but I don't know how many cycles it's had on it, because I've had some of those blue label G&Bs for a really long time, like 6-7 years, and that could be the battery I had out that was kind of from a fresher batch, but I can't say that with any certainty. So you may find that the blue label, the good old blue label G&Bs from years gone past, work just fine for you, but I don't want to report the flight times that I was getting, because I thought they were relatively short. And I just can't say about the health and well-being of those batteries, especially the age of those batteries. They do show on their website, the YMZFPV.com website, that the video transmitter is supposed to output, maximum output, at 250 milliwatts. But you'll see there in the top right-hand corner, I've got Raceband 8 at 200 milliwatts. I checked the VTX tables, and the VTX tables also show 200 milliwatts. that's how it was sent to me, so that's how I'm flying it. And I do think one of the shortcomings of this, it flies well, it flies for a really long time as far as a 2-inch micro goes, is the video performance. You could probably say the same thing about the camera a little bit, but the camera is one of those cameras that we have used for a long time, the Caddx Ant Lite. Not the light version, this one has the screw hole, but you could simply upgrade that if you really didn't care for the image to something like the Caddx Ratel 2 or the Baby Ratel 2, I think is a better fit because of its small size. But it's very efficient, it flies well, but the biggest shortcomings are going to come in the form of you're limited in battery unless you use a battery strap, which it doesn't ship with, as well as potentially the durability, because like I said, with the Walksnail version, I did have a bad crash. I smacked the chimney full throttle going up it, bad angle, probably caught the arm and then smacked over to the camera, and I did break it, and they didn't increase the carbon size. But the flight has ended. You can see 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And our battery is still going up. I did adjust the battery voltage during my slower flights to try to keep the annoying low battery warnings away while I was doing those flights and try to time it. And here you see I'm adjusting further because there were more flights after this flight, so I was adjusting the warning voltage again there, and that's what I did there at the end. So I thought I would just include that. Okay, so I will play up here a little bit of my slower flight footage that I reported some of the flight times across all but these batteries. I didn't report this one too. I did fly this one, but again, this possibly is such an old battery or abused battery that it just seemed awful low. I'll tell you, it was less than 3 minutes, and I was getting over, what was it, 6 minutes on this one. So I presume on something like this that you probably get 4.5 minutes on a 380, just kind of flat exploratory sort of flying. And as I reported earlier on the GNB 550, which the green level ones, as far as flat exploratory flight, are fairly close. I got 8 minutes and 30 seconds on average across 3 different flights with these category of batteries. I also have some damage to report. Not just this one, but you can see here on the backside, I wanged into the chairs that are just up against the wall or that bay window, and I'm not sure if this section hit those chairs and spun around maybe, or if it's when it crashed into the cement or something like that, but I've included that crash information or footage up there as well for your diagnosis. That was by far and away my hardest crash. I had a few that I would bottom out. I did some of those power loops that I wasn't, really on spot on, and I showed you a couple in that flight footage, but I was happy that I didn't break it, because obviously when I went 100% throttle and on this Walksnail version, which is going to be higher weight, so it's going to have more inertia, this one's going to be lower weight, so in theory you would say the durability would be slightly better, but obviously I broke an arm and I broke the base plate of the frame here, and then I also broke the camera. Speaking of cameras, I did mention the Caddx Baby Ratel 2 would be, I think, a good fit. I suspect it's going to fit in there just fine. Unfortunately, I don't have one in hand that I can try out for you. I can dry fit to confirm, so take that with a grain of salt. There's space between the back of this Caddx Ant and the front post. You can see in this one, it's a little bit of a bigger camera. It's closer to the size of the Ratel 2, and it's right up against that, and that does limit your upward tilt. There is a slight adjustment that you can make in the camera, but obviously as your bulk increases this way, you certainly can't use the back part of it. You might be able to tell behind the screw right here, there's a little bit of that gap from that slight slot. Of course, you could DIY by moving it forward, but then your lens is even more exposed. And I think that's another thing they could have done. Specifically with the analog version, they could have reformed this metal a little bit to have this notch a little further back so you could get the camera lens to where it was about even or close to even, just so it's not so exposed, because right as it is now, the possibility your camera lens could get hit by something is, a pretty wide array of different style of crashes or orientations with the quad. The camera is quite exposed. I mean, we see that time and time again anymore, where most of our drone manufacturers just aren't providing us with much camera protection. We can see it from time to time. There are companies that takes different steps, but it's something to think about regardless of what you're looking at, whether it's this one or something else, is how important is camera protection to you versus having to replace a camera. It's obviously a pretty easy replacement in this case because it is, just a connector and a couple of screws, and you can connect that back. The other thing that I always kind of worry about is the battery lead. You can see back here we don't have anything securing it down, and as you wiggle it, it's not wiggling at the solder joint, it's wiggling up where the solder was wicked up into the wire a little bit. But at one point, does that get weak and start to break? It could happen. We have a little bit of frame back here. We could take a zip tie and loop around and then have the notch of the zip tie up top. So that wouldn't impede you from getting your batteries in. That is something that I can do, and I would suggest that if you do that, to kind of push things in so you have a little bit of a wrinkle between your pad that the wire goes to and where your zip tie is. You don't want that tight. You want to have a little bit of a give, a little bit of a wrinkle in there, and then you can plug in. The nice thing about having it back here and then having your battery out here is one of the things that I do with my batteries is I put them in here like this, and I give it a little twist to lock that battery lead down. You could use a rubber band as well. But then when you plug it in, it's going to keep that out of the prop line because you're inside the holder, and then you've got this here, and then you've connected it, the battery connector together. So that's going to keep the battery wires from getting into your prop line. So that works good. So as far as, things to think about, we have a relatively low power VTX at reported 250 milliwatts, but my VTX tables that I had on mine was only 200. And then we have exposed camera. We do have a metal body here that could obviously take damage and bent. We could modify ourselves if you are someone who does any designs and has a 3D printer. Redesign this to extend the antenna and the active element up above the metal. I think that would help with reception as well. But it flies for a really long time. And as far as using a larger size battery, you can get tons of punch outs and high throttle maneuvers. I flew for over 4 minutes, and usually at 2 minutes and 30 seconds to 3 minutes, I crash out. I just make a mistake. My focus isn't quite there. So I had that one flight there that I was showing. There might have been others, but I found that one that I didn't crash out, and I got a full, fairly aggressive flight with a lot of punch outs and stuff on. So looking at the website for the version that I have here, this is YMZ Direct FPV. There will be a link down in the video description to it. This comes in at 175. Oddly, they have a version, or at least a listing, without 04. I don't know how they would get an 04 in this form factor, so I don't know if that's... I just... Maybe they have a different version of this that I'm just not seeing. It's not referenced in the pictures or listed on their site, but so the analog version with an Express LRS receiver already in it, 175. They do have Walksnail versions. Obviously, I reviewed this one earlier. If you want to see that, I will link it down in the video description to my original review video. And they also have this version on the YMZFPV page, so you can just go to that page if you want to as well. The other change that they made was they got their motors either made by someone else or they happen to be making them, so they're now silver rather than the RCN Power motors. And, it flies for a good long time, so if you want a micro that will fly, especially flat, it flies for a very long time. You get about half as much flight time in my aggressive flights than you do in more exploratory, cruisy sorts of flights. Like I said, what was it, 8 minutes and 30 seconds on a 550 versus 410 more aggressive. So even 410 in my experience is pretty long for a micro. And when it comes to performance and micros, you just can't beat analog, because whenever we put HD on it, it just adds weight. The only exception would be HD 0 and the all-in-one board. Then the weight penalty is far, far less, but that's only for a 65 millimeter whoop or a 75 millimeter too. But we haven't seen that all-in-one board for a 2S version. I would like to, but we haven't seen that yet. It just came out here a few months ago. And of course, there's the issue here in the US of prices changing. I can't predict that. I can't help you with that. All I can tell you is the price that it's reporting on the website. But if this particular version is available at any of our FPV shops, whether here in the US or any of our other favorite locations, I will link them all down below. It doesn't have to be an affiliate link. I'm not tied to that sort of stuff. I just fly for fun, for hobby. I have a day job, so this doesn't pay any of my bills. It pays for giveaway, shipping, and stuff like that. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.